We're just about ready to roll. Hello and welcome to the San Antonio Files. I'm Liz Ruiz, and today KLRN, along with the San Antonio Report, looks at aging well in Bexar County. It's an important topic. 1 in 5 Americans will be 65 or older by the end of the decade. And here in San Antonio, the total population age 60 and over is expected to grow by approximately 20%. That's about 464,000 individuals by 2040. What does the future here look like for those over 65? Are we as a community aging well in Bexar County? Well, we've assembled a group of experts to delve into these questions with us today. Dr. Sudhis Seshadri, director of the Glenn Biggs Institute for Alzheimer's and Neurodegenerative Diseases at UT Health San Antonio, and Jane Passioni, managing director of Collective Impact at the San Antonio Area Foundation and leader of the Successfully Aging and Living in San Antonio Coalition, and Kristen Davila, president and executive director of Merced Housing Texas. So thank you all so much for being here. Now, as we said, there's some pretty heavy statistics there that we talked about as far as aging here in San Antonio, the population here and across the United States. And according to the U.S. Census Bureau, by the year 2034, older adults 65 and older will outnumber children the first time in our country. And here in San Antonio, of course, the total population age 60 and over is expected to grow by about 20%. As I mentioned, 464,000 individuals by 2040. This is a significant demographic shift. And so what does that mean for our community? And we're going to begin with Jane, the leader of Successfully Aging and Living in San Antonio, part of the San Antonio Area Foundation. Tell us exactly what that group is about. I love the acronym, by the way, SALSA.
Everybody loves salsa, and
right.
It does get hot and spicy over there. So we are a collective impact initiative where we have over 50 organizations and about 110 individuals working in the aging ecosystem. And I'm known for saying this, aging's so cool, everyone's doing it. So for us to benefit from the longevity dividend with all our older adults aging longer, we're looking at areas of caregiving, housing, transportation, and we also house at the Area Foundation the Reframing Aging Initiative. So it's a long-term social change endeavor designed to really look at how we talk about aging.
And so SALSA does not actually provide the services, but you have partnerships, and so you work with them to help improve the lives of older people in San Antonio, right?
Yeah, build efficiencies, and Kristen's organization is a part of the SALSA network, and we're working in areas of housing because housing is a big issue for older adults. And when I say older adults, and people with disabilities also, because we need accessible housing.
Yes, we do. So along those lines, what do you think are the greatest needs of our aging community? You've mentioned housing.
I think in hand with housing is transportation. So transportation is the other big piece to this. The latest studies show that we outlive our driving abilities by about 7 to 10 years. So what do we do in San Antonio when that happens? So when we think about housing, we've also got to think about that transportation plan as we're thinking about aging in place or aging in community.
And I'm going to open up that question to the rest of the panel. Kristen?
I'd add to that the housing piece, and having housing that's not only affordable, but that is accessible as well. The city of San Antonio has a strategic housing implementation plan that calls for approximately 11,000 homes that need to be rehabbed so that people can age in place. And those don't even include homes that just need modifications so that they're more accessible. So we really got to look at our existing housing stock and be mindful of accessibility when we're building new housing as well.
And Dr. Seshadri, I mean, you work in research at UT Health on Alzheimer's and neurodegenerative diseases, but how does transportation factor into what you do?
Very major role. So I'm a neurologist. I both treat and do research into how to prevent and how to treat and manage the different neurological illnesses we get as we age. 1 in 5 of us, unfortunately, will develop dementia before we die unless we are able to do something to prevent it. And one of the things we believe really helps build brain resilience and prevent the symptoms as well as the progression is community, social, cognitive, meaningful engagement. You know, the physical activity, the cognitive activity, the social engagement. And for that, it's very important that people be able to live in age in place and be able to connect just as they used to. I think our emphasis at UT Health, we are building a center for brain health. We really see this as a partnership between the community and the university in a way that we each learn from each other what are the needs, because these are evolving needs.
Yes, and we're talking about housing, and you're with Merced, Texas. You have 15 apartment communities throughout the state of Texas.
Correct.
Now, how many here in San Antonio?
We have 7 properties here in San Antonio, and we have 3 of those properties that serve older adults exclusively. So we're seeing that once residents move into those units, particularly those that are subsidized by HUD, they stay there until they are no longer able to care for themselves. And the demand and the wait list for those units can be a year to 2 years wait to even get into one of those units. And they're very few and far between. It's like finding an affordable unit and finding one that's accessible is like finding a needle in a haystack, to be quite honest.
What about what the city is doing about affordable housing, especially for the elderly? I mean, what do you know about that?
So I serve on the Housing Commission, the City of San Antonio's Housing Commission, and our role is to oversee the implementation of the Strategic Housing Implementation Plan. And there are many different strategies that the city is taking to address the need for housing for older adults. One of those is making it easier to develop ADUs, or accessory dwelling units, in your backyard. Some people refer to those as mother-in-law units or casitas. So that not only can you have a place for potentially an older adult, a family member, to age in community and keep up that social connection, but also it could also be a source of income for maybe an older adult that is in their home and able to age in their home, but wants to rent out that accessory dwelling unit. So that's one way. House sharing is another way that we're looking at.
House sharing, tell me about that.
House sharing. So house sharing is popular in other cities, and it's not real popular here in San Antonio yet, but I think of it as what I did when I was in college and I was looking for a roommate. You know, there were several of us that lived in a house together, and I didn't know any of those people before I moved in, but we moved in and we had built a little community. And it's important to look at that towards the end of life, when maybe you're by yourself. You can share a space with somebody else that keeps you socially engaged. You've got somebody that's there to kind of keep an eye on you. And then the other thing that the city is doing is really looking at making more of those units that are being built accessible and available to people at the lowest income levels, which is really where a lot of the older adults in San Antonio are, is that extremely low income
And that's
level.
where you help too, right? With this, you have a special program for repairs.
Correct, correct.
Because some of our elderly population is living with deplorable conditions.
Absolutely.
I mean, not safe. Bad for the health, just hazardous. I mean, with mold, ceilings that are about
Absolutely.
to collapse, porches that are unstable, foundation problems.
Yes.
But Merced can help with that?
Yeah, so we have a contract with the City of San Antonio and with Bexar County, and then other generous funders that have provided grants to Merced Housing Texas to make repairs at no cost to the homeowner. One homeowner in particular that was in the county outside the city limits, she was on a well, and her well had dried up, and so she had not had running water for 2 years. Her husband was injured, he was in the hospital, and he couldn't be released from the hospital until he had a place to go home to that had running water. So through the funds that we received from Bexar County, we were able to get her a new well dug and operational. So she's not having to, like she did for the past 2 years, haul water from a neighbor just to be able to bathe or cook. So those are the conditions that a lot of people in our community silently struggle with. They deal with these issues because that's the only way to move forward in some cases. And
how are these projects funded? Is this a loan, a forgivable loan? How does that work?
Sure. So it depends upon the source of the funding. The City of San Antonio's program is a forgivable loan, and so a lien is placed on the homeowner's home for the dollar amount of the construction that was done on the home.
Does that mean there's a requirement, like we'll fix your home, but if you need to live in it for 15 more years?
Correct.
And then if you don't, then the loan has to be paid back.
Exactly.
Okay.
So if you don't live in the home for, say, it depends upon how much money is invested. It could be 5, 10, 15, 20, up to 20 years, the forgivable loan. If that homeowner no longer occupies the home, but perhaps another family member that's income qualified occupies the home, then that's no repayment needs to happen at that point. But if the home is sold, any proceeds would need to be paid to the city for the remaining balance of that loan. But with the county and with the funds that Merced uses, we don't have those same strings attached. We really try to avoid putting a lien on a home because that really does prevent homeowners from wanting to participate in the program when they really need the repairs.
Right.
Yeah.
And Kristen, before we go any further, I've got to thank you for being here today, for making that effort, because you recently had a fall, right?
I did. I had a fall in my front yard. I just stepped the wrong way and my ankle rolled, and I very quickly started to experience and understand the mobility challenges a lot of older adults, and not just older adults, people everywhere in our community face all the time. And it did go through my mind, if I have to have surgery on my foot and have to be in a wheelchair, my restrooms are not accessible. So it helped me to think about those things in my own home. And I think it's important for all of us to be thinking about that and be mindful of that, not just in where do my parents live, but is my home accessible to my friends, to my family members?
Thank you so much for making that extra effort to be here.
Sure.
And I asked you if you were in pain before we started.
No,
You said, you're fine, you're
fine.
fine. So I want everybody to know that. And Dr. Seshadri, there is some exciting research going on at UT Health, and I want you to tell us about it. I mean, but before that, I hear people using the word dementia and Alzheimer's interchangeably, but Alzheimer's is just one of the most common types of dementia, correct?
True. So let me speak to that, and I'd also like to speak to some of the points Kristen raised. So we use the word dementia when a person, an adult, loses some memory, thinking, or emotional control abilities that they had. So dementia is not one diagnosis, it's a syndrome. And unfortunately, it's a syndrome with a lot of negative connotations. People are terrified to hear that word because of the implications of loss of control, loss of autonomy, loss of respect. But that is, of course, misplaced because it's the same person today with the diagnosis that they were yesterday, with all the abilities and lifetime of experience. You know, Tony Bennett, 2 days before he passed, could sing better than any of us in this room, right?
That's amazing. And how does that happen? How was he able to do that so late in life?
So there are abilities that we acquire throughout our life, and these are stored in different ways. There are certain things like cycling or swimming, or for Tony Bennett, singing and playing, that become procedural memory. So sometimes you may have somebody who may not remember exactly what day it is, but I had a patient who could drive 40 miles from central Massachusetts to Logan Airport to pick up his fiancée, but not remember, unless somebody reminded him that this was the day to do that. Not recommending that somebody like that drive, but he didn't do it safely. So there are different types of memory. There is the memory for things that are well established, and often that remains as we develop dementia. So people may remember their childhood home. They may remember their people whom they knew at that time and events that happened at that time. But what happened the previous day or a week earlier, that's called semantic memory. These are recent memories, and encoding that, getting that out can be hard. Sometimes the emotional content of that memory remains. So somebody may remember that they were happy yesterday, but not exactly what was done. Alzheimer's is the term we use when two proteins, amyloid and tau, these are both proteins that we all have in the brain, but an abnormal form of amyloid builds up to a level where it starts interfering with the ability of the neurons to talk to each other. And then an abnormal form of this other protein called tau builds up and ends up killing the neurons. And that, if you see dementia in the presence of too much amyloid and too much tau, that's what we call Alzheimer's. But there are at least 3 other types of dementia that are quite common in older people. One is vascular, you know, things like high blood pressure, diabetes, sleep apnea, hypertension. These things can affect the brain either with big strokes or silent strokes. There's another disease called dementia with Lewy body, where things like walking, keeping your balance can be challenging. It is sort of a mixture of Parkinson's and dementia in a fairly terrible way, where if you treat the Parkinson's, the dementia gets worse and there can be hallucinations and psychosis, and people may wander out. So suddenly the home that they, you know, you're trying to keep people inside their own home so that they stay safe. So in a very short period of time, the home that they know and love, some of these illnesses have times when the person seems completely normal, and other times when there are these challenges.
Well, when we were talking about the housing, aging in place.
Right.
Yes. At times, I suppose some of the patients are able to do that, live at home with a loved one, right?
Right.
But other times, I mean, when do we know, listen, the spouse can no longer handle, you know, the person because maybe the wife leaves the house, as you mentioned. So what happens to those people?
One of the issues you bring up is that dementia is not an illness that affects one person. It affects the whole family and community, their church, their friends. And for every one person with dementia, there are at least 3 others whose lives are turned upside down. And caregiving is a medical illness in many ways. And that's one of the things we research. Caregiving has a lot of, it can give joy, but it can also shorten your lifespan. And 1 in 6 caregivers is under the age of 35. So the kind of intergenerational home settings that you're talking about, that is very vital in many cases, because it may be only a grandchild who's available to look after this person.
That's very scary. And so, but as I asked, now, where do those people go, especially if they are on a fixed income? What happens to them? Jane, you know,
well, families, I think family is the first line of defense, but we do have a crisis in caregiving in America. And I think that we have to address that through policy. And we have so many caregivers actually work a full-time job and then go home and look after their loved one. So it's not just one thing. And I think when we look at older adults aging and some of the things that can happen, we know that 50% of the disability community are older adults, right? But sometimes we don't look at it like that. So we have to solve upstream from here. And I'm really excited about all the new medications that are coming out that show excellent promise in this area of dementia.
Well, tell us about some of the exciting research, because I think we all have heard about cancer survivors, but are there Alzheimer's survivors?
Well, we have exciting developments this year that after nearly 2 decades, there's one medication that's FDA approved and another that should be FDA approved by the end of the year, hopefully. These are medicines that do passive immunotherapy. That is, they are monoclonal antibodies that bind to this amyloid I talked about and take it out of the brain. And so they, we think, modify the course of the disease. And they've been shown, however, they're not completely safe and they're not for everybody. In the process of taking that amyloid out, they can sometimes cause brain swelling. And they have an effect right now of slowing down the disease by 4 to 7 months. It's not that they, so far, bring back memories. There are many medicines that bring back memories in mice, but they don't do it that effectively in humans. What we believe is going to be transformational over the next 5 to 10 years is the ability to make these medicines safer and combine them with medicines that work in other ways, like the tau and there's inflammation, there are other things that happen. And so I think these medicines are very important. But caring for somebody with dementia, helping them live the best life that they can, goes far beyond medication. So, for instance, in our new Center for Brain Health, we will have physical therapists, occupational therapists. We will have speech-language aphasia therapy. We will have a mock apartment where family and caregivers can learn how to safely do the transfers, how to help the person who may have difficulty distinguishing between a plate and the food on it to feed themselves.
So there are organizations to help the caregivers.
There are organizations, and I think this is a part of what every person should have access to. It should not just be a pill, because the pill will fix the problem to some extent. But there are many other things that can make a huge difference in the life of the person.
And before we move away from this topic, a lot of us forget where we left the car keys, or we might forget an appointment or somebody's names. And so if I forget any of your names, forgive me, because I just turned 70. There, I said it. I'm 70. So, but how do we know when it's just part of the normal aging process or when it's Alzheimer's or dementia? Mm-hmm.
As we grow older especially, we all sometimes, occasionally, forget something that is important. And that is normal aging. When there is a consistent pattern of forgetting important things in a way that interferes with somebody's ability to do the professional or personally meaningful things they want to do, that's when we call it dementia. But if there is a concern, particularly people who are very highly educated, very highly functional, they may be the first to detect that they're not performing at quite the level they did earlier. And then if you go talk to your primary care or talk to a neurologist, sometimes they can do testing which can specify whether, in fact, this is the early stage of a progressive illness. And that's important because the early stage is when we are best able to treat and slow down progression.
And I know a lot of us see celebrities and we say, oh, well, they're aging well. I mean, look at, well, Brad Pitt is 60 years old. I can't believe Brad Pitt is 60 years old. But Tom Hanks is 67 but Rita Moreno is 91 and she's still making movies. So, but then we think, well, you know, they're celebrities and they're wealthy and they have access to anything they need. But how does socioeconomic status affect aging here in San Antonio and Bexar County? Any of you?
It's huge. I mean, it's a huge impact. The fastest growing population of people experiencing homelessness are older adults. And that's because the funds that they had hoped would be available to them in retirement if they were able to save. They lived through 2 recessions, right, just recently. And if you're going into retirement, that's something that can be, can really impact your plans. And then for those families that that's not even an option. Saving for retirement is just unfathomable. When you're living on a Social Security wage of, say, $1,000 a month, you know, how that severely limits your options that are available to you. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we're seeing with the availability of affordable housing here in San Antonio is that the folks that are earning 30% of the area median income or less, and that's about $20,000 for a single person or less, those folks are the ones that are having the most difficult time finding not only an affordable place to live, but one that's safe and one that's in healthy condition. So it absolutely impacts the opportunities and the choices that you have available to you.
But if people are on a fixed income, can they age successfully? Can they still, you know, be active and socialize? And here in San Antonio and Bexar County, Jane, are there some services available, especially senior centers?
Yeah, I mean, our senior centers, or I like to call them Age Strong centers, they're amazing. If you've not been in one, I suggest you go in there. Life is going on. It's workout equipment, it's classes. This is a place where anybody can go for that social connectedness that we're talking about. It's so important. So yes, I think that we have a lot of opportunity here in San Antonio to be connected and stay connected. And when we think about our aging in place plans, whether we're aging in place with a disability or not, we need to make sure that transportation and caregiver support are all connected to this thing. The things you love doing now need to be the things that you do continually, even when you don't drive. So what does that look like? Having a transportation plan and being connected to that plan. Like if you are no longer driving and the person you've been living with is the driver and now they don't drive, how do we stay connected to community, our churches, our places of worship? It's fascinating, but we can do it, and we're doing it here in San Antonio.
Well, I can speak from experience there because I have a brother with a disability, and so he doesn't drive, but I really prodded him and said, why don't you just try the senior center, you know, on Babcock Road, it's the Bob Ross Center.
It's got a swimming pool.
It does. They've got a swimming pool, and there is a man there who's 101 years old, and he will tell my brother, I'll be back to play bingo, but I'm going to go with the mermaids, and I'm going to go swimming with them, because there's some women who go to the swimming class. He's the only male, but he's 101 years old, and what a wonderful example that is. But he goes to the center every day, and now I have seen such a change in my brother. Instead of sitting there looking at the four walls or looking for what's on TV, you know, he's active. He goes, he plays bingo. They have other activities for them. He's learning about computers. It's amazing. I'm amazed, you know, at the exercise equipment that they have and all of the other activities. He's even doing karaoke. So I am here to tell you, if any of our viewers are hesitant about this, just give it a try. Go to the senior center. And you say, well, I can't drive. He takes Via Trans. And that is just such a tremendous help. I think we're very fortunate here in San Antonio to have Via Trans to offer services for people who can't drive.
Via Trans is great, but their new Link service available in certain areas. Luckily, I'm in one of those areas where it's an on-demand ride. So that's all those rides are accessible for people who look like me, because not all rides, you know, Uber and Lyft don't have to take someone like me, or if I have a service dog, they don't have to take it. But I think Via's doing a great job of connecting, making sure that we have those connections and that transportation isn't that barrier.
Right. And if people don't know about these things, if they don't know about the senior centers or transportation, and I know there are some nonprofits who also offer transportation. They take people to grocery stores or you know, doctor's appointments, whatever they need. But how do people find out about these services?
Well, I think that you can contact SALSA, but we have sacred.org. I think is a great place to go. It's like a resource online. Go and check out the different pieces that you need to navigate in your community. We have a caregiver toolkit at the Area Foundation. You can check that out. It has all of these different opportunities. Ride Connect Texas, Presa Community Center, Northeast Senior Assistance. These are people who are offering rides for older adults in different areas of our town. But I also wanted to do a shout out for Silver Connect. So during the pandemic at SALSA, our caregiver group got together and we're like, we're doing a great job of connecting with our people Monday through Friday between 8 and 5. But what are older adults doing in the evenings and on weekends? How do we make sure, because isolation is a real thing, especially during COVID. So we looked across our community and said, what do we need? And Silver Connect was born at SALSA in the caregiving place. It's a warm phone line that you can call if you're an older adult and want to feel connected. We have older adults volunteering on the lines. It's housed at Oasis. It's just another program that I'm really proud that San Antonio has that.
They're available to have conversations?
Yes, conversations. You can call and someone will, if you're feeling a little disconnected and you just want to chat with someone, it is a chat line. Of course, you can also get connected to resources if you need them. But the volunteers are trained. It's something you can do. I always say it's weatherproof because it's an app on your phone. So volunteers have an app on their phone. Calls come through the app. You answer that and you have a great conversation. And I'd like to say that, you know, studies show this type of line normally gets maybe, you know, the conversations are maybe 20 minutes. Our group here, you can be an hour on the phone having a wonderful conversation with an older adult about things that they want to talk about. So I'm just happy that we have that here.
That is wonderful.
Silver Connect.
Yes, Silver Connect. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for bringing that up. Is there anything that you would like to add in the area of transportation?
I'd say just in general, when you asked about services, what do we offer and what does the community have available? I think one of the main points of our work at SALSA is to ensure that all of the organizations that serve older adults are connecting and collaborating, and we're not working in silos, so that when the COVID vaccine first came out, you know, we were able to get that information out to the people that we serve very quickly because we had access to that information. When we know that there's going to be of food distribution that's citywide. You know, we can get that information out, free transportation, that type of thing.
And the COVID shutdown was just devastating for a lot of our older population, correct?
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about isolation, right?
Yeah,
Did you
yeah.
see problems with that?
Absolutely. But again, one of the things that COVID highlighted was the benefits of technology. You know, we're talking about the phone, but also improving access to iPhone and computer-based connections. We have a number of programs, something we call Onward, that is for caregivers and for caregiver and patient dyads to do things together. Some of it during COVID became online. We used to have a chorus called Grace Choir, and then they were able to join, 16, 17 people singing together. We offer matinees and partner with some local institutions like the San Antonio Museum of Art to have these tours where you have trained volunteers who can help with the dementia person, and they together can enjoy maybe a movie or a symphony show or a trip through the museum. I wanted to sort of point out that the Senior Center is a place that we go to share information on some of the studies and research that will be happening, as well as to learn, to sort of get the community participation in advising us as to what do they want us to research on. And one of the studies we have borrows your acronym. I'm not sure which came first. So there's a study called the San Antonio Heart Study that began in 1979. And over the years, they've been followed up for a while as SALSA, or the San Antonio Latino Study of Aging, because Hispanics have about a 50% higher risk of dementia than non-Hispanics. So we have a little chili pin. And just this year, the NIH gave about $16 million for us to go back. And if you were a San Antonio Heart Study participant, somebody will be reaching out to you to come back and have brain scans and heart testing and walking and different kinds of testing, including PET scan. Because this is a population where over 50 years ago, we knew how people were in midlife. And so we can understand a lot about what is protective or what increases the risk when people get older. So just drawing links.
And I'd like to ask you all if you have come in contact with super agers, and what do we think is a criteria for achieving that? Because I want to be a super ager too. I mean, we're able to live longer because of advances in medicine and technology, but we don't want to just be living there, not able to move. So how do we become super agers?
So much. There's a great documentary out right now about longevity. It's on Netflix. I can't remember the name of it, but it talks about the blue zones. So diet has a lot to do with it.
Yeah. What are the blue zones?
The blue zones are where we've seen more people reaching 100 and over, basically. And I think Linda Loma in
California.
In California is one of those places.
Some parts of Greece, Japan.
Greece. But what's interesting is they look at these blue zones and find out the social connectedness and activity, physical activity, not just going to the gym and working out, but actually gardening and things where you're just doing exercise as part of your life. Those are really big things.
And doing the salsa.
Of course,
Cue the music.
Very good. There was actually a study in the New England Journal of Medicine that said dancing helped prevent dementia. So you're absolutely right.
All right. I get those J-Lo videos. Let's get going. And it really doesn't have to be a lot of exercise, right?
It doesn't. It doesn't at all. Any exercise is better than being sedentary. But the important thing is that you need to plan early and pick your parents well, because even in early childhood education, you build up brain resilience. in midlife by controlling diabetes, high blood pressure, by exercising during midlife, eating right, you build up brain resilience. So super aging is a gift that is a combination of genes as well as lifestyle throughout life. And so even though you may have genes that predispose to disease, by making right lifestyle choices, you can increase the number of years. Now, I don't want anybody to think that if they have an illness like Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, what did I do wrong? We don't know enough to say that there is a foolproof way to stave off. So super aging is a bit of a combination of luck and the things we can do. But there are many things we can do.
And are you doing research on that, how to prevent Alzheimer's, neurodegenerative diseases? Do you have people here in San Antonio you're testing?
We have, I already talked about the San Antonio Heart-Mind study.
Yes.
We call it SAMS. That's one such study, and there are several others. We are also doing research to understand at a molecular level what's right and what goes wrong. You know, there are certain neurons called von Economo neurons. There are certain proteins called klotho, and there are certain pathways like mTOR inhibition, the drug rapamycin, you know, increases longevity and may prevent dementia. We have a study on that. So there are many ways, and we are particularly, the whole country is interested in what we are seeing in South Texas, because in Texas, 2 in 5 persons are Hispanic, largely Mexican American, and that is the way the rest of the country is going to grow. And so, and this is a very understudied population. One of these big drugs that have been approved, they had about 3% of Hispanics in that. The other one did better, it had about 20%, but that still doesn't reflect. So in our Alzheimer's Center, we became an NIA-funded Alzheimer's Center 2 years ago, and the only one in Texas. We have about 60% Hispanic, which is fair because that's the population of San Antonio. Studying and finding clues in people who haven't been studied before is not just useful for them, it's useful for all of us. You know, one of the cholesterol-lowering medicines, PCSK9 inhibitors, were found because there was an African-American family in Houston that had very low LDL, and normally African-Americans have higher risk, but they found that there was a mutation in this gene. So it's in everybody's interest to make sure that there's equity in research, that there is diversity and representation there.
And gosh, we could go on and on, but they're telling me time's almost up. So, but we have time for, you know, your final thoughts, anything you would like to convey about how we can help our aging community age well.
One thing that we can all do is change the way that we talk about aging and the way that we think about aging, because that, I'm trying to remember how many years in the
7.5.
7.5 years it can add to your life simply by changing the way that you look at aging. That you're not, oh, I'm getting older. It's, I'm older, I'm wiser, and look what I've been able to accomplish.
Let's use that as momentum for new opportunities, new adventures.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think as a community we can, that's one way, very easy way that we can really support each other as we age.
Yes, I think that aging is good, ageism is bad. That's what we need to look at. We need to counter ageism as much as we can out there as we move down this. I mean, as a community though, we have such a great opportunity to benefit from this longevity dividend for the experience, wisdom, and knowledge of older adults. I mean, these are exciting times. I'm excited about the work that we do and the opportunity to learn more each time about these blue zones, about the aging strong.
And on that note of glass half full, I want to point out that even something like dementia can bring gifts along the way. There's a kind of dementia called frontotemporal dementia that can affect language, but can bring out artistic ability in painting and music. It's thought that when Ravel wrote Bolero, he was in the early stages of frontotemporal dementia. So always being aware that there are often gifts that come with the challenges and partnering.
Thank you so much. I'd like to thank our panelists. I'd like to thank our guests. Dr. Sudha Seshadri, Director of the Glenn Biggs Institute for Alzheimer's and Neurodegenerative Diseases at UT Health San Antonio. Jane Passione, Managing Director of Collective Impact at the San Antonio Area Foundation and leader of the Successfully Aging and Living in San Antonio Salsa Coalition. And Kristen Davila, President and Executive Director of Merced Housing Texas. We sure appreciate your time today. Many thanks to our partner for this presentation, San Antonio Report, and thank you for being with us as well. I'm Liz Ruiz. Take care. And now let's call Angie Mock from San Antonio Report up here.
What an exciting panel.
You look lovely. You look like you're ready for the runway.
Thank you so much. Thanks to our viewers. I'm Angie Mock, publisher of the San Antonio Report. We're so happy that all you tuned in for this incredibly important and informative conversation. I learned so much, and I'm so happy that with this partnership with KLRN, you guys just imparted so much important information that is going to help so many people in our community, and that's what our two organizations, the San Antonio Report and KLRN, are all about, is serving this community. So thank you. Our sponsors, we're so grateful for your support: WellMed Charitable Foundation, Methodist Healthcare Ministries, the Village at Incarnate Word, Army Residence Community, and the Alamo Area Council on Aging, and UT Health. Panelists, you knocked it out of the park.
You did.
Thank you so very much. We'll be back in the KLRN studios on November 6th to continue this partnership that we have between the Report and KLRN. And it'll be the kickoff of City Fest. And our reporters will sit down with our city manager, Eric Walsh, to talk about the city budget and how the city of San Antonio is meeting this moment of such explosive growth. So thank you all, and we appreciate your support so much.
Thank you, San Antonio Report.